They're not going to
Okay, we're going to call the meeting to order at 6:20 p.m. And we'll begin the meeting with the singing of Wakanda. Declarations, special interest, or general nature thereof. We have one declaration in regards to Councillor Maybe, who works for Infrastructure Ontario. So the company requesting the zoning change out on Griffin Lake will be considered a conflict, and we appreciate you declaring that. Okay, any other declarations of special interest? Councillor Cody. I believe we are, so you will declare conflict. Okay, so Councillor Cody has declared conflict in regards to grants as discussed at Committee of the Whole and will be finalized this evening. Any further declarations? Seeing none, we'll move on with the agenda. First on the agenda is the in-camera matter, moved by Councillor Bailey, seconded by Councillor Foley. The council adjourned to in-camera to consider personal matters that are identifiable individual, including municipal or board employees. Any discussion on this motion? Seeing none, we'll call the question. All those in favor, please signify. All those opposed? Carried. Thank you. Okay, gentlemen, you can go into the camera. We'll be 15 minutes. Excuse me. I figured face the name.
Yeah, definitely. Nice to meet you.
Yeah, you too.
Didn't recognize you in your suit, John.
Nobody does. How you doing, Brady?
Good, how are you?
Good. Staying under trouble.
Trying.
It's the goal, right?
Yeah, definitely. I'm getting in trouble from my daughter right now, actually,
Oh.
for not replacing the printer cartridges.
Oh, yeah, exactly. So looking for a tutorial.
I wasn't thinking federal school settings. Now I have to handwrite everything.
Why? Just ask, do you know to do that?
I'm not sure she does.
Well, I'm starting today. Just tell me who there. That time of year.
Hello, welcome back to the kitchen. Did you have a response for
So, yeah.
Okay, so we'll move forward with the agenda. Before we do go forward with the delegations, we do have something to add to the agenda for this evening. So moved by, late last week, we received a letter from the Upper St. Lawrence River and Lake Ontario region, who had proposed a letter that would be sent to the IJC and the St. Lawrence River Control Board. It was a very well worded letter, and they're looking for our endorsements. So we will be adding that to the agenda to have a quick discussion about whether or not this council would like to endorse that letter moving forward or not. And we will add that to action required items. We'll put it at the end of action required items. Okay? Okay, moving right along, we'll ask that Katrina Furlanetto come to the podium for a delegation in regards to the CRCA.
Okay. Is this on? Is that? Yes, it is. Okay, great. Thank you. Good evening, Your Worship and fellow council members. My name is Katrina Furlanetto. I am the current manager of Watershed Planning and Engineering at Katrina Conservation, but will be the new incoming general manager starting January 2020. Here with me this evening is Jeff Ray, the current general manager. So this evening I will be speaking to you about Katrina Conservation's draft 2020 budget and capital forecast. Next slide, please. So Katrina Conservation spans about 3,800 square kilometers, and we are a very biodiverse region with jurisdiction that includes the St. Lawrence River and Lake Ontario shoreline, as well as shoreline of over 200 inland lakes. We have the Canadian Shield that runs through the middle of our jurisdiction, as well as a very unique bedrock and geology. As part of our mandate as a conservation authority, we conserve and protect natural resources and have many effective programs and services to do so, which I'd like to take a moment to speak to you about. Next slide, please. So some of the value that we bring to the watershed, we have many programs that span from messaging on flood forecasting and low water conditions, to monitoring the health of our water resources, to protecting sources of drinking water. We also have a climate change mitigation strategy through our tree planting program. So we planted over 1.5 million trees over the last 10 years, with about 164,000 within your township. And we offer many recreational as well as learning opportunities for our residents within the multiple watersheds and municipalities, and our staff are always available to answer technical advice or provide technical advice and answer questions. So in order to grow our programs and find areas for efficiencies, next slide, we've restructured our budgets to become more municipal-like, transparency and accountability and ensure that it's online for public access. In doing so, we've been able to find areas for growth and efficiency, as you can see here. We've been able to optimize our fleet and our equipment. So we've reduced our fleet by 30% and our equipment by 60%, allowing us to find efficiencies in our fleet as well as reducing our operation and replacement costs. We've been able to transition our information technology system. As you can appreciate, a strong organization relies a lot on IT. So we've been looking for ways to reduce the risk of our organization, increase security and reliability. So we've looked into partnering with one of our counties, so Frontenac County, and CRCA will be entering into a service level agreement moving into next year to find an economy of scale and provide that security moving forward. We've also moved to digital processes, so where possible, increasing our customer service through transitioning online. So for example, our development review process, we've been able to put a lot of our documents electronically and continue to look for efficiencies there in terms of time and materials as well as providing better customer service. Next slide, please. So many of you are probably aware, over the course of this summer, there have been quite very few legislative changes, or very many legislative changes through the Conservation Authorities Act review, as well as for the regulations to come out. So as part of this discussion, there were multiple communications from the Minister of the Environment, Conservation and Parks, and I'd like to highlight two for you this evening. The first being a letter that was provided to the mayors of all municipalities, as well as Conservation Ontario, our parent organization, that spoke to an ask that conservation authorities do not proceed with any increases to our levies or our fees pending the legislation and regulation changes. About a week later, Conservation Ontario, through conservation authorities, received an additional communication that said, notwithstanding that, please continue to speak with your municipalities, and if there are support for your continued programs and services, then please continue to make that happen for 2020 and beyond. So those two pieces of communication made our budget process quite challenging. So I'd just like to take a moment to walk you through that process. So in July, staff came up with a service level budget to ensure that our programs and services could continue effectively and ensure that our customer service to our municipalities and partners would be high. In doing so, our general levy increase at that point was a 16.4%. Knowing that this wasn't palatable or responsible to provide to our partners, we went back to the drawing board and was able to reduce that increase to 2.5% based on municipal input, but also still drawing from reserves. We pitched that to our budget review committee, which was accepted at the time, but as you can see, next slide please, that was the evening we received the first letter. And again, we received that communication in the evening after working hours. So back to the drawing board first thing Monday morning to try and determine what the next best step would be. So staff were then able to, through challenging discussions, bring that increase down to 0%. That still included a reserve draw. So in bringing that to our budget review committee, next slide please, we had a discussion about what that would look like. And that is when we received the second letter, about half an hour before that meeting. So in pitching that to our budget review committee, they decided that the recommendation to our full authority board would be to have a 2.2 overall increase to our general levy. And the reason for this is that would make sure that we no longer have a reserve draw. So to give you an idea, in 2016, CRCA was drawing over $200,000 in our reserves, but by having a 2.2% increase in 2020, we will no longer be relying on any reserve draws moving forward. Many of you are probably asking, how did we get from a 16.4% increase to a 2.2% increase? As I mentioned, that was quite challenging, but we had to really look at our programs and services as well as our staffing. So we've reduced some of those areas moving into 2020. For example, at our Wood Lake Conservation Area, we've often offered kayak and canoe rentals. We will no longer be doing that. In terms of staffing, we've had to reduce our staff complement by 5.25 FTE, or just over 10%, to get us to that 2.2% increase in general levy. So in summary, our operating budget is about $5.2 million, and we've had a year-over-year 1.2% decrease in our operating expenses. That's come with quite a few challenges due to federal and provincial funding opportunities that have reduced, but we've been able to find efficiencies, maintain reserve transfers so that we can continue successful implementation of our capital projects, as well as ensure that there are no reserve draws moving forward. Next slide, please. So I'd like to take a minute to speak to our capital forecast. We have developed a 10-year capital forecast with about 137 projects, and they are primarily funded through our reserves. However, there are also federal and provincial funding opportunities that have been available, but those grants are also in decline. Next year, we have proposed about 33 capital projects, roughly over $500,000. In looking at our capital project forecast, which is distributed to all our municipalities, if you were to click on each project number, you would be represented with a detail sheet, which outlines what the project is, as well as where those funding resources come from, just to give you an idea of how we will be successfully implementing that plan. Next slide, please. So as part of our budget process, one of the biggest pieces we look at is our general levy apportionment. So that is, we receive that information from the Ministry of Environment, Conservation and Parks, and that's based on the previous year's parcel value assessment for municipalities within our watershed. So based on that assessment, percentages are divvied up between the different municipalities, and that percentage is then put towards our general levy and lets us know what each municipality is responsible for. So in this case, the Township of Leeds and 1,000 Islands is responsible for 6.64% of our general levy. Next slide, please. So if I were to take the total levy and split that up, I was going to say, as you can see here, it's quite small, but you would get a general levy and a special levy for properties and a special levy for water control structures. So here we've outlined the change between 2019 and 2020. So for the Township of Leeds and 1,000 Islands, for general levy, that equates to about a 0.8% change from 2019 to 2020. And including our special levies, that's about a total of a 0.7% or a total of $1,135 increase from 2019 to 2020 to perform these services. Next slide, please. That just highlights what those small numbers are. And so just to reiterate, our general levy has increased by 2.2%. We have maintained a 0% increase to our special levies, both for our properties as well as our water control structure. So overall, the total levy has a 1.9% increase from 2019 to 2020. Next slide, please. So in summary, what that looks like for this township is about a $1,135 increase from 2019. And lastly, I'd like to talk about Cataract Conservation's plan moving forward. So as I mentioned, there's multiple regulation changes to come. There's a lot of uncertainty in what that means for our programs, our fees, as well as some development review requirements as part of the Conservation Authorities Act. We're hoping to see those regulations by the end of this year. And based on what those proposed changes might look like, we will then look into completing a strategic plan update. So not only ensure that our goals are aligned with the province, but with our municipalities and other stakeholder groups as well to ensure the health of our watersheds. And lastly, I'd like to take a minute to speak to you about an ongoing accommodation study. So the current building that Cataract Conservation is in, our administrative office, is having some challenges with accessibility and is coming to the end of its life cycle. So we've been looking at multiple options on what that means for us moving forward. And I've looked into potential properties for sale and partnership opportunities with other municipalities and organizations. At the same time that we were ongoing this study, the County of Frontenac was also doing the same. So we ended up chatting with them about whether there was an opportunity for an economy of scale and combining. So bringing that to our board, we have decided that the most cost-effective option will be to move in with the County of Frontenac and lease some space from them over the next several years. We don't know what dollar figure what that will look like, but just wanted to let you know that is the plan over the next several years. And by doing so, we'll be able to combine some of our efforts such as reception and property maintenance, as well as finding some other efficiencies. I noted that we're already combining our IT services with them, so it'll be a really good opportunity to grow both organizations while finding that economy of scale. So with that, I'd like to say thank you, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Katrina.
Thank you.
Any questions from the council members? Deputy Mayor, and then Councilor Crump.
Thank you, and through you, Your Worship. I wrote it down because I heard it. I heard you say it. If municipalities wish to continue to use our services, is there an option that we don't have to use your services?
So through you, Your Worship. So through the legislation, there's a proposal of certain services that are considered mandatory and certain services that are considered local, so provincial mandatory and then local mandatory. So we would negotiate with our municipalities to speak about which programs are required locally and would enter into service level agreements to continue those programs.
I know in the province right now, there's some talk about some changes to your mandate. I mean, who approves your mandate? Because it seems to be ever evolving and not necessarily, you don't necessarily take feedback from us. So who's driving your mandate?
Through Your Worship, that would be the province, so the Ministry of Environment, Conservation and Parks. But there will be future negotiations once regulations come out, and we will be transparent and have future conversations with all our municipalities and are welcome to all of your feedback.
Thank you.
Councilor Crump.
Thank you, and through you, Your Worship. And thank you for coming by tonight. And I'm going to stray a little bit from budget items, only because it's a pleasure to have you in front of this council. That's a rare thing. And it's a pleasure to see that we are the third highest contributor to the funds. Question comes up with respect to this core mandate. A lot of my constituents, and I'm really speaking on their behalf, they're extremely confused often by the policy that seems to emanate from the CRCA. And again, I am speaking on behalf of my constituents when I ask this question. They would like greater transparency and clarity on exactly where you get your power. I've done a ton of reading personally, and it always seems that it's the MNR, Ministry of Environment, and so on that is giving you your power, and yet I can't pick the phone up to anybody in Toronto and say, hey, what's going on with the CRCA? And that is a big problem. It's like this unelected situation, and my constituents would really like more transparency on where your policies are coming from. I say this because often it has been where one individual will come to a site, provide CRCA recommendations, and it's not, and it seems to be a one-size-fits all, and that is simply not the case in our township with my constituents. And they feel that they don't have any recourse. Yes, you have a form of governance that sounds good on paper, reads well, but it seems ineffective for the average person. So I'm not sure I have a question in here, maybe that was stated earlier, but there's real concern, and moving forward as general manager, no pressure, I hope that you can take that into consideration, because it's going to be ongoing, and it's only going to be worse with the flooding that is going on the St. Lawrence River. Which brings me to my next point, and I'm going to take a little more time here. With respect to the flooding on the St. Lawrence River, the CRCA has been absent. A month behind times, you're publishing vague letters about, hey, expect water levels to rise. No kidding. You take ownership of Watershed, but you don't take any ownership whatsoever on the St. Lawrence River. Do you have a policy? Do you have a statement for anybody in upper government, not even through in good old IJC? Do you have a policy? Have you talked one over? Have you decided to not our department? I'd be curious to know your answer to that tonight. Thank you.
Sure, thank you, and through you, Your Worship. Just to speak to the first piece, we do have all of our regulations on our website and are always open for feedback in terms of discussing what that looks like in terms of implementation of our programs. But as I mentioned earlier, the direction does come from the province in terms of determining what our mandated core services are. And in terms of on-site enforcement and working with landowners, each individual site is looked at on a specific basis. We have multiple watersheds, but each are very unique in terms of their geology, their bedrock, whether they're on the shoreline. And so we work with our landowners to determine what those unique features are and how that relates to our policy. But I appreciate your feedback, and we'll take those into consideration. For the second piece regarding the St. Lawrence River and Lake Ontario shoreline, we do work and communicate regularly, almost weekly in fact, during high water levels with the IJC and Lake Ontario and St. Lawrence River Board, and provide their messaging directly within our flood messaging statements. We've had over 15 of them, I believe, go out this summer based on the high water levels, and we'll continue to make sure that communication is available and transparent to everyone. But we do not operate those water levels. That is purely with the board.
Follow-up?
Sorry to beat this to death, but it's my job sitting here as councilman representing my constituents. With respect to core mandate, once again, I have often read statements that have the catch-all phrase, in the provincial interest, or looking after provincial interests. When I read the core mandate, I never saw that word ever, looking after the provincial interests. I think greater clarity would be really nice for my constituents as to what is meant by the legalese that I read in those acts. I've read them over and over and over, and it would be helpful when I go back and talk to my constituents if I can say, I think this is where that's going. I've had complaints of saying, we don't understand where your policies, not just where they're coming from, but they appear to be a home brew at home office. They don't appear to many people to come from direct provincial legislation. Or that's badly worded, because clearly it is provincial legislation that empowers you. They want to know where these things come from. Plain and simple.
So, not to interject here, but would it be possible for us to have, I believe that we've talked about having training with the CRCA. Not that you can't answer questions tonight, but I think that there is an opportunity to have a more fulsome discussion about these specific things, because it's his constituents down on the river, it's all of our constituents as we sit here around this table that we have to answer to. And because we give a large levy to the Kamarkway Regional Conservation Authority, we understand that you're trying to operate in the best interest of all the people, but I think the frustration that constituents are seeing is, I realize that it's coming from the province, but the transparency issue, and just to reiterate, I think the question that you're asking is that there's an interpretation, there seems to be an interpretation at your level versus what the provincial policy statement is, and where does that interpretation come from? Because, as you called it, homebrew, at their level, is it just your interpretation, or can it be interpreted another way? And I think that's where the frustration of these residents comes from on a regular basis, because now that we're faced with high waters yet again, they can't fortify their properties and fortify their shorelines because it's not meeting CRCA revenue. So, sorry, I shouldn't have gone on the soapbox there. I'll let you finish that. So, answer the council's question, then we'll move on to Deputy Mayor and then Councilor Maybe.
So through you, Your Worship, thank you for that. And we, as Cataract Conservation staff, would be happy to put some sort of an orientation or public open house, whatever would work for your constituents and yourselves to provide better clarity on the policies, for sure.
Councilor Maybe, and then we'll go back to the Deputy Mayor because he's already had a chance to speak.
And through you, Worship, I have a couple questions, basically back up for page 14. And I know the clerk's moved that, but that's okay. I have some questions because, again, reading through it, you kind of go, okay, there's some not applicable lines. So the specific properties is for building permit kind of conditions and water control structures or dams and water towers and things like that.
Through you, Your Worship, the water control structures are, yes, are dams. So there's 2 within this township, our Temperance Dam and Marsh Bridge Dam. And then the properties are often related to land that we manage, but in this particular case, the township is supporting the outlet boat ramp and continued work with that property.
Okay, and then the other thing that I noticed is that we have the NA for almost everybody but 3 communities that are governed by you. So I'm wondering why that is, specific properties and water control structures opposed to the other ones. And that 3 of the communities, actually, their levy has gone down. I'm wondering why. I've not seen many things that ever go down in price.
Through your worship. So the special levies for our properties and our water control structures are based on watersheds. So for those municipalities within a watershed where there is a structure or there is a property that we manage, they help to support and pay for the benefits of those particular infrastructure or properties within their particular municipality. So it's NA for the others as they don't have any within their jurisdiction. And the second.
As far as the decrease?
Thank you. Through your worship. So the decrease is based on the apportionment percentages. So that formula that I spoke to that looked at the prior year's parcel value assessments, that's provided to us from the province, and the formula to calculate what the percentage of our general levy per municipality within our watershed is given to us, prescribed. So whatever that percentage ends up being, sometimes it's more for some, sometimes it's less for others.
There would have, this is the last year of phase in, I believe, so there might have been a decrease depending on the tax assessment.
That's right.
Assuming that's.
Yes.
Deputy Mayor?
Thank you, Your Worship. I was actually thinking about not commenting, but I can't resist. I've been around here for about 12 years.
Okay.
And out of those 12 years, I was a member of the board. People just don't like what you do. And I know we're going to have some training, and I certainly look forward to that again. I'm just wondering if there's a way that moving forward, and I think it's going to have to take the province, and I think after the election a lot of things are going to happen, but honestly you have too much to say about too many people, and I'm sorry, I know you're new, but and again I'm speaking on behalf of my constituents. It's, we go to comment, we can't issue a building permit until you say, okay. I don't think that's right. If people in our municipality meet the requirements of our municipality, we should be able to offer them a building permit, regardless of what you say. If you want to come in after the fact and say you can't do it, then you go ahead. But you know where I'm going with this? It's really hard as a for lack of a better word, politician to try and negotiate your policies.
Through you, go ahead, your worship. So where the cataract conservation comes in is from a natural hazards perspective. So when there is a water feature, for example, where there's a potential flooding or it's within a floodplain area, that's where we comment. So it's not on all applications. But we are sensitive to the local landowners and the confusion, and we will work to clear that up moving forward.
Any further? Councillor Foley?
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you, your $5.2 million operating budget, I assume that includes salaries, and if so, how many people?
Through you, your worship, yes, that does include salaries, and we're about 25 full-time people.
No work.
We do have 2 part-time.
Thank you. And you made reference to the fact I read and you presented here tonight that you've cut the fleet 30%. What numbers apply to that?
Through you, your worship, I don't have those with me this evening, but I'll make sure to get those and send that through the clerk to you by tomorrow.
So, to say you cut the fleet 30%, did you go from 3 cars down to 2, or did you go from 300 to 200? I'd like to see, and along the lines of our deputy mayor.
10 to 7 on the fleet, on the trucks.
on our fleet, we reduced from 10 to 7,
And we eliminated 4 pieces of equipment.
and 4 pieces of equipment total. Thank you.
When you say equipment, how does equipment apply to the Catawba Regional Conservation Authority? What equipment are you referring to?
Sure, so through your worship, we do have an operations program, and so we have RTVs, UTVs that we go out and maintain our properties, and that's what it is included there, and tractors as well.
Any further questions or comments for the Catawba Regional Conservation Board? Seeing none, thank you again for coming, and thank you for introducing yourself, and we wish you all the best, Mr. Ray, and your retirement. And we appreciate your willingness to work with us going forward.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So the motion on the floor is Councillor Foley, seconded by Councillor Jameson. The council thank Ms. Furlanetto. Did it right the first time, for her budget presentation, and the council directs staff to include this presentation with the 2020 budget for further discussion. Any discussion on this motion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor of the said motion? Thank you. All those opposed? Carried. Thank you very much. Okay. Moving along in our agenda to number 6, the consent agenda. Moved by Councillor Lady, seconded by Councillor Bodie, that the September 3rd, 2019 Committee of the Whole meeting minutes, September 9th, 2019 public and council meeting minutes, and the September 25th, 2019 special meeting minutes be adopted as circulated / amended, and that the June 19th, 2019 Peer Committee meeting minutes, July 17th, 2019 Economic Development Committee meeting minutes, and the July 30th, August 27th, 2019 Committee of Adjustment meeting minutes be received. Any discussion, additions, deletions? Councillor, maybe?
Thank you, Your Worship. The only question I had was on the very first one, Committee of the Whole, September 3rd, is there any update on Alexis Road? I guess this is to Mr. Goheen.
Mr. Gould?
Thank you, Your Worship. This is in relation to a committee of adjustment.
No, it's the Lex Road, it would be the very, it's in regards to his presentation delegation at the September 3rd meeting, I believe.
Yes, my
Is that what you?
That project we are referring to budget 2020. I don't have a sense that we would be able to get anything either engineered out there or actually done right now with our lack of availability of contractors in general right now. So staff will be putting forward for 2020, and it will likely see its way through at that time.
Thank you very much for that update. Any further questions, anything coming out of the meeting minutes? Yes, Councilor Brown.
I was going to leave it till later this evening, seeing that we're talking about Lex Road. Through you, Your Worship, we had, you had mentioned that perhaps your best judgment at some weeks ago in a meeting, you had said in your judgment it should go through a study, an engineering study. If that is still the case, and I understand your thinking, would it be appropriate that the council put a resolution forward to direct staff to prepare a feasibility study and get on getting that engineering report done so that Mr. Jordan's issues could be addressed? Because if you decided otherwise that we can move forward, that's fine. But you had indicated that your best judgment was an engineering study. Is that still your thinking on that?
Mr. Green?
Thank you, Your Worship, through you. It is, at least in the sense of having someone to calculate the drainage area and do a little bit of engineering on it. It's similar to the project that this council approved as staff before as our priority drainage project, which was Gananoque Lake Road. So we had spent it was $5,000 on a design. We're glad we did, because it turns out there's a much larger drainage area coming down through, and we just don't have the capabilities in this office to do that on our own, in terms of electronic resources and stuff like that. So we had to reach out and get some assistance from the consultant. So that project is a similar project, about $5,000 to $6,000 for that little bit of a study, and then we were able to get our permits from CRCA, et cetera, and So my recommendation is to proceed with that. And so if directed, we'll have to fund the whole project somehow, and we can move forward.
Does that answer your question, Councillor Brown?
It answers my question. I just wondered, perhaps later in the meeting tonight, we could put a resolution together to proceed with
Do you require a resolution, Mr. Levine, or is that just going to come through in your recommendations for the 2020 budget? I don't want to belabor the point if it's coming through.
Yes, Your Worship, it's important we clarify, is the expectation that we, or which required is we put some money toward getting the study going sooner than later. We'll still carry it forward in terms of construction for 2020. So if the desire, what I'm hearing is that this council wants to see us move forward with a little bit of a study on that, then I'll need to, we'll need to fund it somehow.
So we'll put a motion, notice of motion by the end of the meeting, and then we'll go forward from there. Any further discussion on the motion that's on the floor in regards to the meeting minutes that were itemized as circulated or amended? Are there any amendments? Seeing none, I'll call the question as circulated. All those in favor? All those opposed? Carried. Okay. So, staff reports. Community and Business Services Report, CDS-016-19, Transportation Master Plan and Active Transportation Plan. This is still part of the consent agenda, I apologize. Is there anybody that needs any of these to be pulled? Deputy Mayor?
Thank you, Your Worship. Planner report number PL-029-19, zoning bylaw for 2312 of that road.
Anything else to be pulled from the staff reports? Councilor Rob?
Yes, looking to back in that one. Thank you. Your Worship, a question.
Yes.
Are we going to have discussion on each of those staff reports, or is it up to us
Unless
to
we
pull them?
have to pull them in order to have
I
discussion.
think we should pull the planning report 03319, treasury report 010-19.
Sorry.
Pull them all.
Okay. Which ones are they?
The planning, the treasury, the operations, and perhaps CDS.
Oh, is that
Information items are still on staff.
We're still on staff reports.
Excuse me.
That's okay. I'd rather we have the discussion and have them pulled and then not think we've just passed them. The only other one that I was wondering about. Yeah, I think the grants one needs to be pulled as well. As well for further discussion. Anything else that needs to be pulled from the consent agenda? Okay, seeing none. Motion on the floor to accept consent agenda other than CDS 0-01819 community grants and planning report number PL-029-19, both of those being pulled. So the council approved the staff reports as presented at the October 7th, 2019 committee of the whole meeting. Any discussion on this motion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? All those opposed? Carried. Okay. So we'll move forward with the Community and Business Services Report number CDS-018-19 community grants all intake. Councilor Bodie, you want to move forward with your declaration of interest? Thank you. Ms. Goodman, if you'd like to take the floor.
Certainly, and thank you, Your Worship. I do understand that there was a particular application that we wanted to do some additional investigation on, and I have reached out and made contact with that organization, and I do have a bit of and narrative behind that. However, I have asked, and I do not have it in my hands yet, is for a little bit of a written information, something that's a little bit more substantive. What I would propose at this point, if council so chooses, is to award the grants in the amount of $19,960, so that's the exclusion of the one, and I will bring additional information forward at the November meeting regarding the particular application that was of concern. And in all fairness and a heads up, I did receive one via mail, which is very somewhat uncommon, and I did miss it in the earlier rounds, and I will be bringing that one forward for council consideration at that time as well.
So we'll put a motion on the floor. Thank you very much. Moved by Councillor Beatty, seconded by Councillor Jameson, that council approve the distribution community grants in the amount of $19,960 as detailed in Appendix 1 to the Community and Business Services Report number CBS-01819. Any discussion on this motion? So just to further clarify, the Dreams in Motion has come out for pending further review and further information, as well as we are adding another one that was received by snail mail for consideration, and the manager will be bringing that forward at a later date for consideration by council. May I ask who the other one was for, just out of curiosity?
It is Sealy's Bay Legion. Actually, they're looking for some tables and chair replacement, if I'm not mistaken, and potentially a new commercial dishwasher. We've got an aging population that's trying their best to host a myriad of events, and unfortunately are sometimes not able
You
to
didn't ask who was aging, Mark Jameson, but thank you for offering.
And so those are the points that they're asking for. I will be working with my colleagues to do a comprehensive review, and again, that information will come forward at the November meeting.
Okay, thank you for that update. Any further discussion on the motion that's on the floor? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor of the motion as presented? All those opposed? Carried. Okay, second staff report that's been pulled is planning report number PL-029-19, zoning bylaw amendment application number Z 2019-0122312 of that road. Councilor or Deputy Mayor Lackey, would you like to speak to this?
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. The only reason I pulled this is because, I drive by this property, I don't know how many times a day, for the last 12 years, and it's odd to me that that property was prior to Severance, it was part of the house next door. When they decided to sell, they said, well, we'll sell the lot, we'll get, we'll sell the house and we'll sell the lot. And so I don't know, I don't like this where all of a sudden you sever a property and unbeknownst to anyone, it reverts to something in our official plan, and the owners are not aware. So they end up essentially selling a property, and it's not, I don't want to say it's not dishonest because they don't know. They don't know that the property isn't residential because they weren't told. And now they're paying, what, $1,600 or $1,700 to get this back to what it originally was prior to the severance. So, I think there needs to be a mechanism somewhere where if there's going to be a rezoning of a property or something to that effect, that we've got to capture that prior to being here today and wasting a lot of people's time and money.
Madam Planner?
Thank you, through your worship. I can't speak to the specifics of the timing and when the zoning became what it was on the property. It's likely that the split zoning resulted when the new zoning bylaw for the township was done, because it does directly correspond to the official plan mapping. I guess the other piece of it is that the zoning mapping for the township wasn't previously digitized, has now been digitized and shows property fabric, which it maybe previously didn't show. Going forward, in the new comprehensive zoning bylaw, we will be including wording and interpretation clauses that speak to zoning being interpreted to property lines, so that some of those split zoning situations can be interpreted around so that it applies to the lot as a whole. Additional interpretation clauses around properties that may have split zoning, because there are a number of properties, larger lots, that are split zoned. It's just the way it works with official plan mapping. I would also note that there is correspondence further on this evening's agenda requesting that their application be refunded.
Thank you.
I think the point is well taken, though, Deputy Mayor, the fact that people's property can change without them really knowing. And I think that, just to speak to the other part of my life, land titles, when we went over to a digitization of land titles when you go and transfer property, a lot of these mistakes and errors were made in regards to deeds wrong, people wrong, mortgage companies wrong. There's a whole bunch of things that happen. Technology is great as long as it works. But to the Deputy Mayor's point is that we can't expect people to own property and then have to pay us to fix what was originally theirs in the first place. That's not fair. The good news is that we have the ability to waive this here tonight, later on in the agenda, but I think it sets a precedent as well, coming forward from other owners, property owners that could have the same thing that's happened to them, and they'll be coming back to us for the same particular reason. So it's just a heads up for council. But we appreciate that going forward, we'll do everything in our power, especially with our new official plan and zoning amendments, bylaws that are coming forward, to hopefully avoid this trigger in the future. Councillor Maybe? Or sorry, Councillor Cody, I apologize.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just further to what the Deputy Mayor had said, technically the previous owners thought it was designated as a building property. I mean, why wouldn't they when it was all one piece at one time? And I think, from what's already been said by yourself, Your Worship, but we should put the onus back on us, the planning department. When somebody comes forward wanting to do just what happened here, if there's going to be a change, they need to be told up front, if you do this, there's ramifications. And if we don't do that, then I think it's incumbent upon us to revert back to where it stood prior.
Thank you very much. Any further comments? I'll put the motion on the floor if not. Moved by Councillor Cody, seconded by Councillor Maybe, that council approve the zoning bylaw amendment to rezone the subject property from rural to and agriculture to rural to consolidate the zoning on the property located at 2312 Outlet Road. Any further discussion on this? Seeing none, we'll call a question. All those in favor, please signify. All those opposed, carried. Okay, so that's everything on the consent agenda for reports. So the next thing on the agenda is the information items. Is there anything on the information items that need to be pulled? Deputy Mayor?
Well, I think Councillor Burrell was pulling them all anyway, but that's fine with me. OPR 039-19, and I'm not just picking on operations, I would also like to kind of pick on them all, but I will pull that one.
So operations and planning, okay.
Sure.
Are there any other reports for information that need to be pulled for discussion? Councilor Maybe?
I'll just read what I have on my list. Case TR 00919 PL PL 3319, TR 1019.
Sorry. Which one are you?
Okay, sorry.
Okay. So as of right now, I've got the planning report pulled, the treasury report pulled, operations report pulled, and the rest are part of the consent agenda. Is there one more, Councilor Rock?
Perhaps the community business report 02019.
So departmental update.
And also just a couple of words on the Township of Springwater request for resolution support.
So you want that
Does it need to be pulled?
in order to discuss it? We need to-
Yes, thank you.
Okay. So, do you want to make a motion or just discuss it? I don't think we need a motion on these to discuss unless there's something coming up.
Just discussion.
Just discussion. Okay. So,
Sorry, I do have a couple more. OPR 03919, CBS 2019, CBS 2119.
okay. Okay, so we'll go down the list of pulled items, and then we'll go with the consent agenda. So, planning report PL-033-119, planning department activity report. Madam Planner, would you like to speak to that briefly before the questions are asked?
Thank you, Your Worship. This report is a summary of work completed to date. It's a high-level summary, so it doesn't include absolutely everything that we've accomplished this year. I would note that this report also includes a summary of 2018 because statistics were never provided and there were never any reports brought forward with summaries from 2018. I'd be happy to answer any questions you have about the report.
Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, through you, Your Worship. At first glance, when I looked at this, and I apologize, I didn't write many notes, but what I did retain from this report was that, operations basically were down. Our permits, our operations were down, but the only thing that seemed to be up was the money that we collected. Is that indicative of what we're gonna see in the future? Because it looks to me like people are paying much more for their permits and their fees, and we're doing much less in the municipality.
Madam Mayor.
Through Your Worship, just for clarification, the numbers in here are up-to-date, so we still have the rest of the year to follow through as it relates to that. I think you're asking specifically about the building in terms of looking at the building fees received to date as it relates to the number of permits.
Yeah, that as well, yeah, building mostly.
So I would note that the building fees are up, and it's because of the scale of some of the projects that have gone through this year, very similar to the discussion that we had earlier in the year when we brought forth the building revenue report, that the fees are actually up because of the nature of some of the applications and the large developments that some of them have been. For example, some of the large buildings at Hubs, the grain elevator, some of those large projects have brought in higher building fees because of the nature of the development. Looking at the actual number of building permits, we're on track right now with where it was year-to-date last year to meet and be very similar to the set of numbers that came forward last year in terms of number of permits. With respect to planning applications, again, the numbers are similar to what they were last year in terms of actual applications. I would note that our drop-ins are actually up, given the number of drop-ins that were done last year, and that's a year-to-date. And in terms of bylaw, one thing that I would point out is that we've been much more proactive in terms of going out and having discussions with people with respect to bylaw enforcement over the course of the year. in trying to achieve actual voluntary compliance of property owners rather than the issuance of orders. So while some of the numbers may appear that we're not where we were last year at the end of the year, we're still tracking to meet most of those numbers.
Further discussion in regards to this planning report? Councillor Maybe?
Thank you. Through you, Your Worship, I know I did ask, have this been pulled. My question was with building permits on track, and that was answered. Thank you.
Councillor Brown?
Thank you, and through your worship. Just a couple of points. I think you've answered it already, Lauren. With respect to the bylaw and site investigations, that's a significant increase. But part of that, if I heard you correctly, is more trying to ask for compliance. Does that sound correct? Okay. And to follow up to that, do we have enough oomph? I know we were looking to make our bylaws actionable at one point. Are we still moving forward with that? And do we have the personnel, once we've done that, to make it work 7 days a week, every day of the year? Because right now we seem to be operating 5 days a week. Does that sound right?
Madam Planner?
Through you, Your Worship, we are working on the bylaw work to make sure that we have different ways and better ways to enforce the bylaws that we have. In terms of the bylaw enforcement that we have right now, you're correct, it is 5 days a week during work hours. We don't have evenings and weekends. That's something that we would need to look at going forward in terms of budgetary constraints and how we do that. It's something that can be looked at, but the first step is to get our bylaws in order so that we actually have the tools we need to do the enforcement.
Further questions for the planner in regards to this planning report?
Oh,
sorry. Councillor.
Thank you. In building residential, are we on target to meet our requirements with respect to the Minister of Housing and Municipal Affairs in terms of the percentages? Are we behind? Are we on target?
Through your worship, if I could just ask for clarification, is it the amount of land that's designated and available for residential development, or I'm not sure exactly.
Is it not a requirement that we actually have some housing? Or am I wrong in
Are
saying
you
that?
speaking in regards to affordable housing? Are you
Yes,
speaking of
40,000. Yes.
Through your worship, that's something we need to look at. That's a difficult number to track in terms of what is available, what is affordable, and what the inventory actually includes. So that's something that we can look at going forward when we look at updating our zoning bylaw, our official plan, to bring everything in line with the provincial legislation.
Good question. Thank you. Any further comments or questions in regards to this planning report? I know that I appreciated the update this time of year to see where we're at, so that we know that, like the questions earlier asked, are we on track? Are we moving forward? Are we gaining ground, losing ground? And I think it's important, especially going forward with budgetary decisions in the next couple of months, to see where we're at. So thank you very much, Madam Planner, for providing that report. Next on the list is Treasury Report, financials at September 30th, 2019. Madam Treasurer, is there anything you want to point out, or would you just like to ask questions? Oh, we just have the questions come forward. I guess that's probably just as easy. Councillor Maybe.
Thank you, Your Worship, and through you. With the tax arrears, are they repeat offenders, let's say? People who have, because 2015, 16, 17, and 18 for that matter, they seem to be, some of those are pretty consistent. Are they the same people that are falling in arrears?
Madam Treasurer.
Through you, Your Worship, I would have to go back and look at the actual details behind those numbers to figure out if we have repeat offenders. But when you're looking at a property tax owner's account and they're in arrears, typically, if I looked at it, if I was in arrears in this township, I would have amount in each of those lines because I'd probably be behind, and part of it would relate back to 15 private road to 16 and so on. So it's typically you have people, if they get really far behind, it's broken down into these different segments depending on the year. Does that make sense?
Does that make sense to you? Sort of. So I think to simplify, the amounts get higher closer to obviously current
year, because people might be behind a month or two. But when you're talking about people who are as far back as 2015, I actually don't think that that's a horrible number in the grand scheme of things. Not to say that we should aim for zero, but that's where the tax sales come into account. And we had 8 tax sales, I believe, earlier this year, and that were all successful, where we made all of our money back. We didn't lose anything. I think there was only one that did not come to fruition, and that was a rock at St. Lawrence, which actually was not visible because of the hot water. But otherwise, we got our money back, whatever what was put in, if we had to remediate any properties. So that was a positive note, because sometimes that is a bit of a challenge. But the hope is that 2019 arrears will disappear gradually over the next, go ahead.
So we just did the final tax billing in August, so having a report at the end of September, this number will appear bigger than the 3 million. It's a bit of a timing again, because we've just done our final billing. So actually, and on the flip side of that, the revenue on the statement also is basically showing the full year's taxation revenue, because we've done that final billing now. However, instead of it being prorated like 9 months of the year, we have actually showed 100% basically of our revenue. And yet here you see, so all that's also hit the receivable, waiting for people to pay. But again, because we've run that this soon after we did the finals, this will probably come down quite a bit in the next month or so.
Does that satisfy your question? Councillor Brown.
I was curious, through you, Your Worship, on number 9, I get a little confused when I read community improvement plans, and it might be my problem in understanding. There's community improvement plan in the Planning Act, and then we seem to be talking about sidewalks or something, or community improvement plans for resident or streets. Am I commingling those, or are they, could you explain?
Madam Planner, would you like to take that question, because I know that's under your jurisdiction.
Thank you, through your worship. There was money that was included in the 2019 budget that was bringing in funds from the community improvement reserve to undertake community improvement plans. Following a review of everything in terms of what needed to be done to be able to get to a point where we could do those community improvement plans, we didn't spend that money in the 2019 budget. So that money will go back into reserves. And what we've done is we've submitted a red grant to obtain funding for community improvement plans with matching funds to be included in the 2020 operating budget, so that we can actually complete the community improvement plan work for the township and use those reserve funds as incentives to fund the community improvement plan work. What I mean is incentives in terms of community improvement plan funding. So if someone applies under the community improvement plan for funding for beautification, for paint, for flowers, for whatever we end up scoping within our community improvement plans, we can use that reserve fund money as an incentive to say, here's your funding to go towards your improvement, rather than using reserve funds to actually do the work.
Thank you.
Any Deputy Mayor?
Thank you, Your Worship, and I originally wanted to put an operations report, but I think everything I want to say sort of would be encompassed in this report. In the capital budget, we have basically realizing in an election year we were late getting through the budget process. There were a lot of factors involved, but taking out one Jesse Street, I mean, we have $16.5 million that we budgeted in capital, and if you want to take 11 million out, we're at 2, and I do realize invoicing is delayed, but it just doesn't seem that we have accomplished what we set out to. And I'm not sure why. If you look at the funds, they're there. And there's the Rockport boat ramp. We spent $12. The Rockport parking. I mean, there's several, I don't want to pick on operations, but there's several
projects, which we as a council sat here and said, you will do these things, and here's the money to do it, and they're not done. And again, I will let some of that go because of the late process of the budget, but this year, if we're gonna have our budgeting done by December, I think the idea is that, you know, we wanna be one of the first to get the budget done so that we can go and cooperate with the county, and we can, you know, we can get those contractors before anyone else does, so that we can get these things accomplished. But I don't know, I look at this year as kind of a bad year.
So is there a question in that for the operations director?
No, there really isn't.
Okay. Is there any, sorry, before I move on to operations, the treasury department, does anybody have any other further questions in regards to the treasury accounts that were presented? Councilor Rowe.
Just a final question, really, and it follows along with what Deputy Mayor Lackey was suggesting. On our capital budget, taking out Jesse Street, we're at 3.9. What restricts us, or what are the restrictions upon, from my understanding, of building a capital fund? Can the thing be 5.9 million? Or is it based upon our reserves? What actually restricts it? What restricts our capital budget? Is it supposed to be the money we can spend in 1 year? Because as the deputy mayor pointed out, we haven't come close to spending it.
The treasurer could probably answer that, but essentially it's up to us to decide what the capital budget is. It could be a $20 million year, it could be a $2 million year, correct?
Through your worship. So the only real restriction that a municipality would have in terms of figuring out how much they want to spend in capital would be if we were borrowing, and then there is a limit that's set by the Ministry of Municipal Housing and Affairs that determines based on a number out of the financial information return, I believe it's the revenue number. There's a percentage that tells you how much you can spend on debt, so there is a calculation for that. Other than that, it would be totally in council's discretion how much they wanted to include in a capital budget based on available funding, whether it was debt, reserve funds, or pay-as-you-go, meaning we would take money right from the tax, the tax levy, and put it right to capital. So that would be up to council's discretion.
Thank you, and it wasn't, the questions were based on where we're going with our asset management thoughts more than anything, so thank you very much on that.
Deputy Mayor, a follow-up question?
No, actually, another comment. I wanted to give credit where credit was due, because some of these line item issues were things that came in under budget, which we're very grateful for, so thank you.
Thank you very much. The other thing is that they might be under budget right now, but if the final building comes in, it may not be under budget. So it's, the challenge is, the reason we asked for these operational reports was to get an idea of what was done and what still needed to be done. Doesn't mean it won't get done necessarily, but there are some mitigating factors from time to time. But really, it's to get an idea of where we're at, and that if there is any specific projects that are burning in any of your particular parts of the township, please do go to the director and have those conversations offline as well, or the treasurer, and find out if it's a money problem, if it became a bigger project than what we thought. I know that some of these projects have been on the books for quite some time. Nonetheless, as long as they're continuing to move forward, that is our job as council members, ensure that they can.
Q4 looks like a really busy time of year. And everybody's here on them, so I'm not sure how we're gonna get this stuff done.
Any, Councillor Jameson?
I've been sitting here trying to avoid putting my foot in this, your worship, but I know we passed a budget that certainly as a novice council member, I really didn't understand in some respects. I also know that we appointed committees, and now we're wrestling with the consequences of some of those appointments. My view of it, when I came on council after a few weeks, is that staff was working within an organizational management structural nightmare, and a lot of things that we might have thought would come down the road based on that budget I'm surprised we've got as much done as we have, given the conditions that I think our staff was dealing with. And in my own point of view as manager, I would rather be prudent and be delayed on delivering projects to fruition until that point where we understand what our assets are, what the plan for those assets are, and where we need to invest going forward. So if this is a lost year, I think in some respects maybe it is, but you know, the undercurrent of that is we could be building capacity for something much more effective next year, but also, and I'll end up saying this again later, in light of some expectation of cuts or changes in provincial policy with this, that, and the other thing, we need to be very prudent in where we're putting money and how we're managing our reserves as we move into the 220 budget cycle. So if we do have a little bit of money left over, maybe we should be happy about that.
Any further discussion on these reports? So we've gone through the planning report, the treasury report, and the operations report. Any further discussion on those? Okay, moving on. Quarterly report, operations report, OPR 039-19. Next, a report that's pulled is community business services report. Oh, sorry, you do have a question. I apologize. We're moving on to Councilor Maybe.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just a couple of questions. I know the roadside mowing was delayed by quite a bit. Possibly Mr. Green could allude to how long that machine is going to be in operation and how many more roads are going to get the treatment that some have received. The other thing that I noticed in here was the railway crossing for the county line is going to get shaved down. Do we have any work going to be done on the rest of the railway crossings that we have in our jurisdiction? And the other final thing is that I have mentioned a little small no parking sign at Harbor Rock. I would like to see get up very soon. Other than that, very good report.
Mr. Levine?
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you, Councilor Maybe. The new mower, was supposed to arrive today, and it did not. And that's sort of a pattern that we've been seeing from our vendor. We're not very happy with this at all, and we've our unhappiness that we've lost that mower for regardless of the season. So it should roll in here one of these days, and we probably will be able to take it for a test run on that. But yeah, for what we've been down to one, and I think we've been making very good progress. So what you're seeing on roads like Sand Bay and Centennial here is what we would go on a cycle, a 3-year cycle through the road, really clear the brush back. So we can't expect that to be every road every year. We're seeing on those roads this year because that's sort of our cycle. So I think Sand Bay, we're still working on that, and you can imagine it takes a while to get that level of brush clearing for that length of road. So we probably won't see much more than that done this year in terms of the brushing program. Railway crossings. Yes, I have reached out to my counterpart a number of times about the crossing here at County Road 3. Not getting much of a response on that.
Your counterpart at county, is that what you said?
Yes, to be honest, but we've cataloged all the other crossings, and the ones that have the ones that are in township jurisdiction. There's really not much on our side to do on those. So to me, the worst ones that I see are County Road 3 and County Road 34 is getting worse and worse. But again, those to me are the responsibility of the counties and the railway and not us. But we're certainly keeping an eye on things, trying to push that ball forward on that end.
Okay,
So
Councilor.
just to follow up, are we putting pressure on them to get some movement on their repair? And I know it's difficult from our point of view to put pressure on them, but I know that it is a topic that keeps coming up where we get it mentioned in the public. So
I think that Director Levine can speak to the correspondence sent to Transport Canada in regards to this.
That's right, Your Worship. Staff met with Transport Canada person here not too long ago, and they gave us the contact information to put forward our concerns, complete with photographs and stuff like that. certainly haven't heard too awful much from their end, but we certainly have been sending correspondence to the counties as well, and we'll continue to do so until we see something fixed out there.
So maybe it's something that you would like me to bring up at county as far as motion, because we've been talking about this since we were elected. I don't think, I'm quite concerned about driver safety, to be honest, especially at the County Road 3. It's getting worse. You know, even I crossed County Road going through the village of Lowertown on the weekend, and they might actually have a worse crossing now than we do, which sort of surprised me. But that particular crossing, having that, the ability to shade down the pavement and get that in much better order is up to the county, that's not up to us. So I will speak to Mr. McCurchie and bring a notice of motion to county council in regards to that, because I'm very concerned about the winter maintenance of that, because they can't plow it properly. It only gets worse through the winter. So, point taken. Councillor Fody?
Thank you, Worship. Just a comment to our operational department. Living on Santa Fe Road, I've had a lot of neighbors come by and express the gratitude of what's been done up there. You alluded to a 3-year cycle. I can correct you, it's closer to a 30-year cycle on that road. The brushing department is actually going around trees that are the size of my waist. That would be what the last time it was cut back that far. Having said that, it's been misinterpreted that because of the great brushing job you're doing now, that the new mower is in fact doing it, which, as you well know, it's not. So there's a little bit of overlap there of confusion, thinking this is our new mower in progress, when in fact it's not even operating. But we do thank you for those of us who live on that road. We can actually see 20 feet around some of the blind corners as to 10, opposed to 10.
Thank you. Councillor Brown?
To you, Your Worship, first I'd like to thank Adam for producing a nice report once again. But I do have a couple of questions, and something that alarmed me was the good old Rockport boat ramp again. And now I'm reading MNRF reviewer has flagged location as having potential for species at risk. What I'd like to know, in that this has been in every report since I've been on council, I'm sure before that, is that something new? And who would be responsible for, is the engineering firm calling in the MNRF? And I find it hard to believe that after so many years of a ramp being there, that species at risk is being called into question. And then I'm just going to make a comment. If that is the case, every development on the waterfront is going to have a species at risk assessment. So where did that come from? Is it new?
Councillor, or Director Goheen, I apologize.
I can't say that it's new or not. I mean, we were sort of expecting that. But until we received the letter from the MNRF reviewer, which was on the 23rd, it just says it's been reviewed, your application, and the location has been flagged as potential species of risk habitat. So it's new. And it is advised that you submit an application to DFO and MACB and keep them involved. So it triggered, something in their review triggered that done. We were hoping it wouldn't, because we're simply replacing an existing facility with a new one. But that is the way of the world, and so now we've had to engage a specialist to go in there and do an inventory and prepare a report for us.
Thank you very much, Ed. I wasn't trying to put you on the spot or anything. I was just curious. It just seemed to pop up after months of being there. So thank you for the clarification. And I am concerned that that influences every development in Rockport. If it's the ramp, what's next? That's just a comment. So thanks.
Any further comments in regards to the operations report? Seeing none, I'm going to call a break for people to take 5 minutes to go to the washroom and have a 5-minute break before we go on to the rest of the reports, and then we'll try and tidy up the rest of this meeting. Okay? 5-minute break. If I make that everybody's sick.
It's absurd.
You guys are
It's always helpful to
No, it's all the old school letters.
It's amazing.
1946.
Mario was surprised was the first time.
No, I just, if I say, I'll just add my standard questions. How do we do it? Let's ask them about it. Yeah, just raise this. I noticed the revision there. So did I see it really? No, you just said revise based on Are they still interested in doing
I just thought you were
As I said, it's a private one, or something, it's 5 years from now.
Some people are just Yes, and that's what the first one is. But I don't want to use that letter That's what I
Okay, everybody, if we can reconvene, please. So we'll reconvene this meeting at 8:02. Three more reports have been pulled. Community Business Services Report, departmental update has been pulled. Who has questions on that? Councillor Grau and then Councillor Mayhew.
Thank you, and to you, Your Worship. I was just wondering, again, about the vote, have we moved forward with any memorandum of understanding? There should have been discussions that, regarding what we had talked about previously. And I was curious about the fish cleaning station up at Furnace Falls. Are we responsible for the cleaning of the fish station? Because that can be problematic. And just one last question, the grant intake for the spring of this year, just look at, if you could forward a copy of that to me at some point. Those would be the three questions I have. Thank you.
Certainly, and through you, Your Worship, we are continuing to work through our negotiations. There are a few points of, as per previous discussion with council and whatnot, that we're continuing, like I said, to do our background information on, and I do anticipate we will be coming back to council with an update before too long. Regarding the fish cleaning station, so actually, the way we do actually have staff through the summer months that are at Furnace Falls on a regular basis. So really it's our Kendricks Park staff, but I do have them stop at Furnace Falls every day because we have the washroom facility there. So the intention will be to add that to their cleaning portion, but it's designed in such a way that it leans out over the water so that the remains are to go into the lake and that they're naturally cleaned. And where there's any contaminant, there's a built-in water pump that it can be flushed, and that will have staff do any additional cleaning.
Just to follow up on that, I think you want to be very careful. I don't think it's legal to be putting fish remains into the lake. It's not legal, I don't believe, to put them into the river. Just, you want to confirm that one? Thanks.
I will absolutely look into that. The funding came from the MNR, so I kind of anticipated at their recommendation that it was going up there, that perhaps that would be okay, but that is an excellent point. And regarding the grant intake, yes, I will absolutely get you a copy of that. Councillor Beatty.
Yes, Mayor, thank you. One question I had was the swimming contractor, after 2 years, where are we going? And I know that you're having some minor issues with the approval each year. And do you see ongoing issues with the particular location?
Through you, Your Worship, I actually was just having an email conversation back and forth with my colleague at Parks Canada, and she has agreed that we are able to get a 2-year agreement at this particular point in time, which is critical, simply because health unit inspections for operating those kinds of facilities are becoming increasingly stringent. And of course, you know, when we're looking at public health, of course, they should be. However, there are some minor capital improvements that are required. So I will also be meeting with Canada later this week to see if we can negotiate some sort of agreement as to how we can make this happen so that we can access that facility for the next 2 years. As you're aware, as part of the Recreation Master Plan, it's not, our consultant at this particular point in time is not recommending a pool. Now, that is simply because we can get grants for a pool, and the cost of the installation or construction isn't insurmountable. However, that there are a lot of cautions and caveats with regard to ongoing maintenance. You will see, I think, as the final recreation master plan comes through, that there will be a recommendation that we do an additional business study on that in future if the council so wishes, joining with Gananoque again, if that's the will of the council or joint councils. But at this particular point in time, it looks like we're able to proceed for at least a 2-year period of time.
Any further questions in regards to the departmental update for community business services? Seeing none, we'll move forward with the community business services report regarding the municipal drug strategy. Questions in regards to that? Somebody have questions? I guess maybe that was not pulled, I apologize.
Comment that I attended that meeting and I thought it was beneficial, and I was particularly, I think I mentioned this, I was particularly taken by the students. I thought they were a very intelligent group, but also they offered, from a student point of view, some things that I did not understand, that certain children feel it is a safe place and a secure place to go. Children that hadn't occurred to me in this day and age, but things like drop-in centers and so on, potentially at Jesse Street might be just a wonderful thing. Thank you.
Okay. Next. Before I move forward, you have a question about Remembrance Day. It wasn't pulled, but allow it.
Yeah, sorry, I missed that one, because I know that we had talked about it at the last meeting about certain members going to the different Remembrance Day or memorials, possibly laying these or at least being representative there. Is there some sort of schedule of who's going where so that we're not double covering?
I've committed to Lyndhurst, as has Councillor Oakey. So there will be services in Sealy's Bay, in Lansdowne. I don't believe there's one in Rockport. I think it's at Loudertown Legion. So the other two places, I'm sure would love to have any and all council members that are available on those days. I've committed to rotating myself through the township. So next year I'll do Sealy's Bay, and the year after that I'll do Lansdowne. So, Ms. Goodman?
And I would think you, your worship, just like to add to that, if there's a particular event that you will be attending, if you would kindly let me know, and I will ensure that there is a wreath there. Typically there is for councillors to lay, but if you could just let me know, then I can make sure that we can let the organizing committee know for these various events, and that again, that there is a wreath available for you to put down on behalf of the municipality.
Councillor Jameson?
Just to say, yes, still learning. Just to say, I'm going to see this Bay.
I
For sure.
would anticipate it.
Thank you for bringing that, Councillor Hayden. Next on the polls is the Township of Springwater request for resolution support for joint and several liability consultation. Councillor Burrell, you had brought that up.
Thank you, to your worship. I read through this. It's very good report. I believe that looks like it's written by a lawyer. And beyond support, I do know that the AMO is working on this, but if there's a word to say strongly support, I would like that noted, because this is a very serious stuff, and that is a great report to read. So, thanks.
If you would like us to lend our support to this letter, we would need to make a motion to send a letter of support to this municipality. In support of it, correct? If you want to endorse it. We're not endorsing it, we're just receiving it as information.
And I most certainly would like to, if I get a seconder, I would like to push strong
Councillor
support.
Jameson's on
Yeah,
this.
resolution. Feel free to use your wording on the resolution. Be great. Thanks.
Okay. This is Springwater, the joint several liability consultation. Any other questions or concerns or comments to be made on any of the information items? Councillor Baby?
The other one that I was kind of interested in was the Hastings County septic inspection and pump out and the training. And they're saying that possibly the pump out people could be the surveyors of such systems. I'm not so sure whether I'd be comfortable with that, the liability
we are endorsing it at this point. Is there any other questions or concerns or comments to be made on any of the information items? Brian? Okay, seeing no further comments or questions, motion that's on the floor is moved by Councilor Jameson, seconded by Councilor Fody, that the information items be received and filed with the exception of the request received from the Township of Springwater that council direct staff to send a letter of endorsement. Any discussion on this motion? Seeing none, I'll call a question. All those in favor, please signify. All those opposed, carried. Thank you. Unfinished business, anything under unfinished business? Seeing none, we'll go forward with the action items. Moved by Councilor Fody, seconded by Councilor Jameson, that council endorse the Wiltsey Creek Marshland Revitalization Project by providing township staff resources to assist the working group in the preparation of grant applications. Discussion on this motion. Councilor Fody.
Thank you, Your Worship. I've been thinking about this. Due to the fact that Wiltsey Creek is in our jurisdiction, obviously, and this has been an ongoing problem for decades. According to Mr. Orton's presentation and thus what we read, are we not prudent to maybe step up and ante up and put forward $5,000 to get this ball rolling? We're asking, they have all these other groups behind this presentation, like Ducks Unlimited, CRCA, and it goes on and on and on. And I'm just throwing it out there that maybe should be making the first step forward.
Councilor Opie.
Through your worship, with respect to your concerns, did quite a bit of work with this group, and because of my links to the CRCA, and I said to them right up front, they'll never become a budget line item with us, but they're free to apply for grants, and that's the way they should go. They'll probably receive their grant applications favorably, but they should initiate it. I don't think we should. That would set a precedent I don't think would be a good idea with respect.
Thank you for the input, Councilor Oki. Any other discussions or consultations in regards to this motion? Seeing none, I'll call the question as it is written. So the council endorses the Wiltsey Creek Marshland Revitalization Project by providing township staff resources to assist the working group in the preparation of grant applications. All those in favor of the motion as presented? All those opposed? Carried. Next motion on the floor, moved by Councilor Fody, seconded by Councilor Jameson, that the council refer the matter of membership in the St. Lawrence Corridor Economic Development Commission to the EDC for their advice to council and staff for their recommendation to council by November 4th, 2019. Discussion on this motion, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Your Worship, and through you, read this a few times and had some discussions, and I'd like to, number one, change the word advice to something different. I don't see how the Economic Development Committee can give you advice for the simple fact they've never been to a meeting. They, to me, it's been you and George Horton who goes to these meetings and understands what goes on and the policies that are there and what we have to offer and what's happening. So I'd be cautious to go to the Economic Development Committee for advice, so we could change that word to something else.
To input?
Input
Looking for
would be
their input to council.
fantastic, because I don't think they should be giving you advice on something they technically know nothing about.
Did you get a seconder for that, Councilor Fody? Jason?
Your worship, thank you. I didn't get an opportunity to ask this question earlier. I need to be reminded why the November 4 date is there.
We have to give our notice to the corridor commission by the end of the year. And because we're doing budget considerations, we need to know by November 4th if there's one way or another, whether they're supposed to provide new staff with some input prior to that date so that they can make recommendations again, for or against based on what their input is, as well as myself and George Horn.
So I need some further clarification. The notice was, okay, correct me if I'm wrong, the notice was for an impact for the 221 year?
220.
220 budget
Right.
year?
So essentially, we fulfilled our commitment at this point. We paid our money up until December. Yes, it was good.
Pardon me, and thank you, Your Worship. We were required to give notice earlier this year because we had to provide 12 months' notice if we wanted to withdraw from the agreement or from the membership. Now, the challenge being, of course, is that when we purchased our membership, it crosses our fiscal year or our budgeting year, so that we will have a small carryover into 2020. However, our membership at this point would be complete by, I believe it's the end of June of 2020. Our Economic Development Committee has actually been doing, and this is in part to Deputy Mayor Lackey's point, doing a scan of various organizations and agencies, the investments that are being made there to a particular point and what services they provide. And so we have Charlie Mignot coming in actually tomorrow afternoon to present to the Economic Development Committee so that they can help provide context at a regional level with some of the other services that are being provided. When we sent the letter to the commission indicating our intent to withdraw, they came back with a counter and allowed us until the end of this calendar year, I believe it's mid-December, to opt back in, which means that we would then budget for the full amount for 2020, the full $41,000 roughly, and our membership would maintain. So we would carry our membership through then to June of 2021, I believe. Hopefully that provides some clarification, and again, the Economic Development Committee is simply hoping to help provide some context, I guess, within some of the other work that's on their radar that's happening within the area.
I think the concern was that the word advice was that we were taking their advice verbatim over our own discourse. So I think input is just more, like you say, a context, a different context from outside of the people that are actually on the committee and what they're seeing forward-facing coming out of what has or has not happened with the corridor. So. Okay, so the motion that's on the floor, to
moved by Councillor Fody, seconded by Councillor Jameson, to be amended by, that motion is coming from Deputy Mayor Mackey, seconded by Councillor Fody, that the word advice be removed and replaced with input, so that council will refer the matter of membership in the St. Lawrence Corridor Economic Development Commission to the EDC for their input to council and to staff for the recommendation to council by November 4th, 2019. And so we'll have a vote on the amendment to change the word advice to input. Any discussion on that motion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor of the amendment? All those opposed? Carried. And therefore, I'll call the question on the amended motion. That council refer the matter of membership in the St. Lawrence Corridor Economic Development Commission to the EDC for their input to council and staff for the recommendation for to council by November 4th, 2019. All those in favor of the amended motion? All those opposed? Carried. Thank you. So, next on the docket is moved by Deputy Mayor Lackey, seconded by Councillor Grell. Whereas in the 1990s, conservative government forced many municipalities to amalgamate in order to become more efficient in service delivery and thereby reduce costs. And whereas there is evidence that amalgamation has not achieved this goal, and whereas there are many positive examples of small rural municipalities working together in a cooperative manner via shared agreements that respond to local needs, now therefore be it resolved that the provincial government, before the provincial government forces amalgamation in any of the 444 municipalities in Ontario, our AMO organization demand that the provincial government do the following. 1. Hold a local referendum letting citizens decide to amalgamate or not. 2. Conduct an evidence-based study to show that amalgamation actually saves costs, jobs, lowers taxes, and reduces the provincial deficit. And 3. Allows municipalities to work out their own local collaborative agreement that reflect their needs and to be permitted to do so on their own timeline. Number 4, to emphasize the political reality of forcing amalgamation on the many rural municipalities across Ontario, and that further that a copy of this resolution be sent to the Association of Municipalities of Ontario, Rural Ontario Municipalities Association Roma, and all municipalities in Ontario. Discussion on this motion. Deputy Mayor, you want to speak to this?
No, but I do appreciate the fact the original was a little bit different, and Councillor Grell's sort of finessed it to a much better document.
Councillor Oakey and then Councillor Grell.
Thank you, Your Worship, through you. Paragraph 1, hold a local referendum. Referendums are not very popular in the parliamentary system, and that's kind of a red flag to pull. I'm not saying take it out, but I wouldn't expect much from it.
Duly noted. Councillor Grell.
More comments, and I just wanted to say that I would imagine most people around the table are aware that there's been, for the past year, an ongoing study by the government regarding amalgamation of the 8 regional governments in Ontario, which represents 82 municipalities. That line seemed to have ended somewhere around Eastern Ontario when I looked at it. So Eastern Ontario is, I guess we're not a region, it's the Durham region, York region, so on. So there are studies being done, and I imagine there's stuff coming downhill. Thank you.
Councillor Fody.
Thank you, Your Worship. In reading this, I agree with the principle and the content of why we're doing this. My concern is the timing. We're going through the stages of applying for a large grant through the Ontario government for 1 Jesse Street. So we got our hand to for the thank you, and then we're gonna shove a little meanness at them on the other hand. I have a problem with the timing. I don't have a problem with the content. I have a problem with the timing. I'm an advocate of a person that doesn't like biting the hand that feeds me, and I see that as what we're doing here.
Any further discussion on this motion? Seeing none, I'm going to call the question. All those in favor of the motion as presented, please signify. Those opposed? And I'm going to vote in favor of this motion.
and I'll just put a comment on that. While I understand not writing the hand that feeds you, I think it is prudent upon all the municipalities to look at all options available to them in light of the current climate at the provincial level. While I understand that going to them and not agreeing with what they have to say, I think that they're going to tell us what they're going to tell us regardless. But I think if we show that we're looking at options and not just amalgamating for the sake of amalgamating, because often amalgamation does not always prove fruitful as far as savings, lowering taxes, saving costs and jobs and all that other stuff. So I'd like to see some of these points move forward. So thank you for that. So it is carried. Moving right along to motion on the floor by Deputy Mayor Lackey, seconded by Brock Burrell, that the council directs staff to prepare a formal agreement with the leads of the Thousand Islands Public Library, clearly identify roles and responsibilities with respect to facilities, maintenance, and assets in discussion with the library board and the library CAO for council approval. Discussion on this motion. Deputy Mayor Lackey.
I just would ask through your worship to Kim to just give a bit of background as to where this sort of came about and the frustration.
Okay, go ahead, Ms. Goodman.
Certainly through you, your worship. We have been great partners with the public library here in Leeds and the Thousand Islands. However, during my time here since 2012, use of the facilities has never been formalized. So therefore, when we're looking at things like our custodial contracts and whatnot, there's few holes for interpretation in terms of roles and responsibilities, who maybe sweeps a cobweb out of corner, and confirming when the facilities can be accessed by staff for maintenance purposes, for example. There's a number of minutiae that should be addressed in terms of how the buildings are used, who is responsible for things like snow removal, for example. And of course, we've had a number of moving parts on our end, and it's just to make sure that both the municipality and the library line up in terms of expectations, so that when something is dropped, with those things being clearly laid out to begin with, then we know if and when finger pointing needs to happen, where it needs to happen, and in which direction.
Thank you very much, Ms. Goodman. Any other questions or concerns in regards to this motion that's on the floor? Seeing none, Councilor Rock. Thank you.
I believe I strongly support this. When I think back to the $400,000 reserve fund that the library board put away, they obviously had a plan and a thought for all that money. So I think a very clear understanding of responsibilities would be in order. Thank you.
Councilor Wong.
I strongly support this as well. Not to tell too many tales out of school, but the personnel situation in the library is in flux, and there are many concerns. So perhaps this will help stabilize things somewhat.
Thank you very much. Any further, Councilor Jameson?
Well, only to Councilor Oakey's comment, is this particular effort going to engage the library in some of its overall practices, or is this really just dealing with infrastructure and the sharing of services, or sharing of using the building?
I would say that it is really more about the technical aspects of using our facilities and what their expectation is of us versus what their expectation is of us, and our expectations of them, and how they conduct themselves within the facilities. There's been some crossover challenges where they've been utilizing, for example, the kitchen in the community building in Lansdowne when it's been booked for somebody else. So they're crossing over because it's just automatically assumed that it's part of their facility, when in actual fact it's not. So I don't want to pick on that particular issue, but it's a clear indicator that things are clearly laid out. And if we're moving forward with the library as it sits, then we need to define those times and rules and regulations. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Your Worship, through you, Councillor Jameson. I think this could lead to more. If we open up that, you know, when we get some rules in place and we open up that communication, then perhaps it will lead to more clearly defined policies in other areas with the library. Here's hoping, right?
And not to get down in the weeds as we do have a motion on the floor, but I will speak to the current climate in regards to library hours and my later update. Okay. As far as any discussion on the motion as it's presented in regards to identifying roles and responsibilities with respect to facilities, maintenance, and assets, I'll take those comments or questions. Seeing none, we'll move on with calling the question. All those in favor of the motion as it's presented? All those opposed? Carried. Thank you. Okay. Next motion on the floor, moved by Deputy Mayor Lackey, seconded by Councilor Garrell, that council approve Falcon Lane as the name for the private lane off Larkin Lane, as recommended by bylaw attached as Exhibit A to Planning Report number PL-032-19. Any discussion on this motion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? All those opposed? Carried. Next motion on the floor, moved by Deputy Mayor Lackey, seconded by Councilor Garrell, that council authorize pursuant to Section 27 on the Ontario Heritage Act that the property located at 105 Quabbin Road be added to the municipal heritage register, and that council approve the application regarding a heritage celebration grant received for 105 Quabbin Road. Discussion on this motion. Councilor Beatty.
Sorry, Your Worship. There's been some extensive conversation with the owners. I was just wondering if there's whether they're going to finish the inside historically, or is it just pertaining to the exterior of the buildings?
Madam Clerk.
Thank you. Through Your Worship, the exterior of the buildings, absolutely, as it relates to the whole property being heritage property. In terms of the interior, there are elements, and some of the heritage construction is being preserved, but they are also being finished, I believe, to a modern.
Just as a side note, I went looking for this property, couldn't find the 911 number. Just as an aside, so just wanted to make that known. Maybe you can make a comment once it's passed that if they need a new 911 number, we can hook them up. All those in favor of the motion on the floor as presented, please signify. All those opposed, carried. Moved by Councilor Foley, seconded by Councilor Maybe, that council pass a zoning bylaw amendment to rezone the subject property to a rural special exception zone 43, RU 43, attached as Exhibit A to this report. So I'll reread that motion. The council passes zoning bylaw amendment to rezone the subject property to rural special exception zone 43, RU 43, attached as Exhibit A to this report for 1995 Outlet Road. This is the grain elevator north of the village on County Road 3. Any discussion on this motion? Councilor Garrell.
May I have significant thoughts on this? Are we talking the full amendment where it says section 11.1 be added to the rural zone provisions? Is that what we're discussing? Okay.
I think so.
Do you have time?
Yeah. That's why it's on the table. We have all the time in the world.
When I read the solicitor's letter to the township, it says toward the end, it says the township is advised that an expansion of the operation will require rezoning. There is no mention about grain elevators. When I read the application, it was the same. The it states the township required or was concerned that there was an expansion requiring amendment. However, the planning, not the planning act, the bylaw that we have, 07079, was clearly amended by bylaw 15-056, and it stated that in rural areas, new permitted uses were on-farm agriculture related and on-farm diversified use. Definition of agricultural use is clearly in the current wheelhouse of the bylaw, and also on-farm agricultural related use. And I'll just point out a few uses that are A-OK. Agricultural product storage and distribution center, cold dry storage facilities, farm supply service facility, farm input supplier, feed, seeds, fertilizer, including distribution facilities, farm product outlet, feed mills, farm product sales, grain dryers serving local farmers. So, in my opinion, one, we don't need to do anything, and we should write this person a letter of apology and give them back their $1,250. Or, number two, my concern is, as I read the amendment, it states, notwithstanding, a grain elevator shall be permitted use on subject lands. I do not connect the dots to a grain elevator being allowed in this amendment to the original concern, which was the expansion of an operation. Two things we could do: throw this out, or amend the wording to make it what the intent was, apparently, and to say to permit a grain elevator and large-scale commercial operation. And for the life of me, I brought this up 2 or 3 weeks ago, and nothing's changed. And I am quite curious about that, and that's why I'm bringing it up. So we can amend it or throw it out.
Madam Planner.
Thank you, through your worship. The existing agricultural zoning allows for an on-farm diversified use as well as an agricultural on-farm use. Sorry, I don't have the terminology right in front of me. In looking at the definitions of those, it speaks to small scale and local, serving the local economy for uses such as, and so in putting the bylaw forward the way it's put forward, a grain elevator in and of itself is a permitted use, not specifically as an on-farm diversified use, which is intended to be a small-scale local use. So that's the way the bylaw was crafted. If you want to suggest a change to allow the grain elevator, I can't recall your exact word. However, the interpretation was, and the reason that staff determined that a bylaw amendment was required was because the way the zoning is written, the existing zoning, it only allows for a small-scale, on-farm diversified use that serves the local economy and the local area. And in doing the rezoning, the intent is to allow the broader scale operation so that it can serve more than just the local area at small scale. And I apologize, I don't have the definitions right in front of me at this moment.
My question would be, where is the definition of scale?
Yes.
And once again, I don't get the connection between a grain elevator as a permitted use and answering the question of an expansion of an existing operation. We have to amend the wording, or it's not. It doesn't answer the question, I don't think. That's my opinion, and I'm asking council to help me out here, because I am fully in support of the grain elevator. It's a wonderful project.
Councillor Oakley, then Deputy Mayor Lackey.
Thank you, Your Worship, and through you. One of my first boyhood memories is seeing the grain elevators at Kingston. And believe me, compared to those, this is a dinky toy. Those grain elevators no longer exist. But this was the first and largest capital investment, private capital investment, in our township in many, many years. And serves much outside the province, in fact, probably not much outside the Eastern Ontario region. And really, it's operated pretty much by a family, an extension of their agricultural operations. And even if it was expanded to the 12 grain elevators that might fit on the property, compared to, say, industrial commercial ones that are owned by Quaker Oats, it's still small scale. It really is. Thank you.
Deputy Mayor Lackey.
No, thank you, Councillor Olkey, and that was exactly where I was going, and the fact that it looks large in scale, but it's really not. To be quite honest with you, there's probably 4 or 5 farms within 10 miles that would probably fill those. So, I mean, if you want an elevator, there's one in Prescott, that's commercial. So yeah, I think it's all relative to scale, and I don't think we, I don't think our policies, I don't think our bylaws take into consideration scale. So I would like to see this go away.
Sorry, I almost got you, Deputy Mayor, I apologize. Councillor Jameson.
No, thank you.
No, thank you.
I certainly support the project, but my sense in trying to read this and also read between the lines is I think our planning department is trying to bring some orderliness to some things that haven't really existed in the past. I mean, because new planning processes and everything else. So the kind of waiving fee with respect to this is one thing. I think that's perfectly reasonable. But if there's an opportunity to bring some orderliness to the process so that we don't find ourselves trying to define scale down the road on another project, whether we like it or not, is really, I thought was the whole point of this, not opposing the project or thinking that the planning department is opposing the project, because I don't think they are. It's to look for a sense of orderliness that we can rely on going forward. That's my point.
Further comment, Councillor Fody?
Thank you, Your Worship. Is the intent in the planning department to word this such so that it allows for future expansion? Maybe that's where this was coming from all along. Because as Deputy Mayor Lackey had alluded to, by late terms, you stand there as we did the opening day and look at the sheer size and volume. You stand there aghast thinking, how would they ever fill it? But as Deputy Mayor Lackey said, in the reality of things, 10 farms around here that commit to filling that will have it filled this year. I'm going to reminisce a little bit. On our own farm in 1966, a 14 by 30 foot silo went up. Those in the silo field, like Deputy Mayor Lackey could relate to, or our worship, it's a joke now. Nobody would even build one that size. But the point of mentioning, back then, neighbors stood there and asked my father, do you suppose you'll ever fill it? I think that's exactly what's going to happen out here. It'll be full quicker than you may think.
Through you, Your Worship. In looking at the definition of on-farm agriculture-related use, it speaks to a use that's farm-related commercial, farm-related industrial, that's small-scale, directly related to farm operations in the area, and benefit from being in close proximity to farm operations and provide direct products and/or services to farm operations as a primary activity. The word expansion in terms of the proposed bylaw and the discussion around it, in terms of the context, was not just expansion in terms of the actual physical structures on the property. It was an expansion in terms of the interpretation to allow a grain elevator as a standalone grain elevator, not as just an on-farm agriculture-related use, which would, in the long term for the business, allow for expansion on the property should they decide they need to put in additional bins in the future for further processing, and so that it's not considered as an on-farm agriculture-related use. The permitted use is a grain elevator specifically, so that it's allowed to service the broader market, not just small scale and local, which is where we had a challenge as staff interpreting this bylaw, because small scale and local is very subjective in terms of what you're looking at. That's why it was the opinion of staff that a zoning amendment was required to clarify those pieces.
Councilor Brown.
Thank you, to your worship. So therefore, the word expansion, the semantics of everything I've read, you're suggesting then that the word was expansion of the permitted use as opposed to expansion of the size of the business. Hence, a simple word grain elevator. I'm not sure that the initial intent that we have a letter from a lawyer in front of us here. Is that how it was presented to the folks in charge of this project? It seems if it was as simple as that, they would say, oh, okay, that's fine, we'll have at it. But they have a lawyer's letter in front of me here. So I don't think that was maybe what they felt the intent was. And therefore, I still ask if this bylaw, which they had to pay for, plus a lawyer, is only to say, yeah, you can go ahead and put a grain elevator there. I'm not sure I buy that. And I would still like to see either an amendment in the wording to include something like larger scale commercial operation, or I'd like to see it defeated and still let them go ahead with it because it's already covered.
Madam Clerk?
Through your worship, I would agree that the addition of the word commercial in front of grain elevator could potentially resolve the issue that we have in front of us, because it really was a matter of interpretation. So the letter you have in front of you was a letter that was provided to staff in support of allowing a building permit to be issued, speaking to it just being a small-scale grain elevator to serve the local area. Following that, additional information was brought forward that we had to look into further in terms of the scale of the operation, the extent of where the business was operating and how the business was operating, which further led to the interpretation that this could potentially serve a broader market than the small-scale local market. So for the long-term use of the property and the value of the property that the owners put into doing this development, it made sense to clarify that the intent is that this be a commercial grain elevator operation, because continuing to interpret it as a diversified on-farm agriculture-related use ties it to small-scale and local, which is, again, subjective and undefined. So I think that your suggestion with respect to putting commercial in front of the words grain elevator could address that.
So are you talking about
Thank you for that.
Sorry, are you talking about amending I'm just trying to see where you would like to have that put in, or is it in the report?
I was then thinking of amending the section C,
Okay.
where it says right at the bottom.
Okay. That's what I was thinking.
Section 11-1A, on land zone RU43, a grain elevator shall be permitted on these lands. Perhaps it should be a commercial grain elevator operation shall be permitted on these subject lands. And again,
Is that amenable to the members and the planner as discussed? It's on page 9 and 11 on the report, page 353 and 393 is what he's referring to at the very bottom of the page. Excuse me.
Since beginning of notwithstanding. Yeah.
So the beginning of that paragraph, notwithstanding section 11.1A on land zone RU43, a commercial grain elevator operation. Is that what commercial grain elevator is sufficient, I think, for the operation as part of the deal, shall be permitted on the use of the subject lands. So that amendment is being presented by Councillor Corral. It's not part of the motion, the way the motion is worded, but it would be part of the zoning amendment as it's worded and registered. So this is the actual bylaw that's coming later. We would have to amend it at that point in time. Okay, so we'll have to pull it out of consent and have that amended in the bylaw section, because we're making the change to the bylaw. Okay, is that conducive to what you're trying to accomplish?
Well, I'm just, yes, and again, I'm just looking for a healthy conversation from council because this concerns me. And again, I have to say, it concerns me because the planning department has asked certain things of these people, and it strikes me as, after all that discussion in front of this council, et cetera, and God knows what went on behind the scenes, we have this, we need to fix this or toss it. Thank you.
Deputy Mayor Mackey?
This has always been pulling me a couple of different ways because being in the industry, I was always classified as commercial because I didn't own a farm. I couldn't run farm plates, but there was a company north, Delta, we all know who it is. You know, they ran their commercial business on farm plates, which gave them a tax advantage on pretty much everything they did. And I'm not saying that in a bad way. I guess I was just dumber than him. But anyway, again, we're talking about farm vehicle. Actually, they've already taken, I don't know how many wagon loads or have gone through the dryer already. You know, they're farm vehicles, they're farm plated trucks, it's agriculture related industry. So call it what you want. It's farming. It's all we have in this area now. It's agriculture. So let's treat it that way.
Is that it for questions in regards to this motion as it's on the floor? Councilor Rupp?
Just before we proceed, I'd like to reread again this letter, if you can reread the motion.
Sure. Moved by Councilor Cody, seconded by Councilor Maybe, that council pass the zoning bylaw amendment to rezone subject property to rural special exception zone 43, RU 43, attached as Exhibit A to this report for 1995 Outlet Road. Councilor Cody.
Just for clarification, I gather that there's a misprint in this handout here that 1992 is erroneous.
Only because the 911 number was only given in the last, this morning, so.
Okay, I just don't want to get caught on technicality of approving the wrong.
I just added because the clerk gave it to me 2 seconds ago.
1995 is correct.
1995, Outlet Road is the civic 911 number of the A. As far as any further discussion on this motion, the only question I have is in regards to taxation, as far as whether it would be taxed as agricultural, commercial, industrial. Does this affect any of that?
Through your worship, we did receive something from MPAC recently that spoke to the classification for grain elevators, and it looks at the operation rather than the specific zoning.
So that the special exception zone 43 isn't specific to a certain type of taxation one way or the other. Okay, that was just where I went. Further discussion on the motion as it's presented? Councilor Jameson.
I'm still trying to understand, trying to read all this, trying to understand it. To the extent that nobody seems to be against the idea of the operation going ahead, and perhaps expanding in the future. Again, on back, my reading of it is actually to bring an orderliness to it in the context of other things that may have come along. But if I'm hearing the planner right, if down the road they want to do a major expansion, will they not have to come back to us to the extent that we might have to consider the scope of the business not falling within this very vague, semantically driven language that my sense was there was an effort to clean up with this proposal. So it's not about for or against the program or the operation. It's about trying to find something that allows them to get this thing off the ground and look ahead, because hopefully it will grow. And if they don't have to keep coming back to us, is that not the point? Is that not what I heard?
Add letters of the intent of what this one brought forward.
Thank you, through your worship. That's correct. The existing definition speaks specifically to local and small scale. And with this zoning amendment, a grain elevator, be it a commercial grain elevator, would be a permitted use. The modified zoning would allow for future expansion and improvements on the property in terms of the expansion of the business. So the amendment itself was to clarify the scope and the nature and the scale of the business, so that it's not limited to local and small scale.
Further discussion or questions? Councilor Rowe?
I hate to say it, but given what the planner has just said, I don't see that as being implicit in the way it reads. And therefore, I still would ask that the amendment to the wording be to include commercial at that's a minimum, commercial enterprise.
This is so I think the challenge that I'm having with this right now is that, or not the challenge that I'm having based on what you're asking is you want the amendment to this bylaw prior to passing this motion. Would that be correct?
That is absolutely correct.
Okay. This motion is on the floor right now without the amendment. So it would be, how do we do this? Exhibit A has the bylaw as amended. So we could provide attached as Exhibit A and then as amended to this report. So we can amend the report in this. We would just need a motion or a motion for amendment. Word commercial. Okay.
Larger commercial enterprise, just something that gets us over the size, this scalability and this definitional, which no one has no definition of it.
That's right. Thank you for your patience. But large is subjective too. So commercial, meaning, I think it's commercial is the word.
Commercial superseding large.
That's right. Yep. Thank you for bearing with me while I figured that out. So that's. Okay, so Councilor Corrali, you're making that amendment. Does somebody want to second that amendment? Terry? Excuse me. No, I don't. Thank you.
Yeah, I don't know. You didn't want?
So the amendment that's on the floor, moved by Councillor Burrell and seconded by Councillor Foote, that the word commercial be inserted before grain elevator in Part C of the bylaw number 19-045. Any discussion on that amendment? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor of the amended as discussed? All those opposed? Carried. Now, that council, going back to the motion that's on the floor, moved by Councillor Foote, seconded by Councillor Maybe, that council pass the zoning bylaw amendment to rezone the subject property to rural special exception zone 43, RU 43, attached as Exhibit A to this report, 1995 Outlet Road. So as Exhibit A amended to this report. As amended. Okay. Further discussion on this motion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor, please signify. All those opposed? Carried. Thank you. Okay. Next motion on the floor, moved by Councilor Morale, seconded by Deputy Mayor Lackey, that council directs staff to proceed with the advertisement to fill the 2 voting member vacancies for the Economic Development Committee. All those, any discussion on that motion? Councilor, or Deputy Mayor Lackey?
Who left?
We received resignations from Cliff Edwards and Lawrence Bishop. Any discussion on this motion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor, please signify. All those opposed, carried. Next motion on the floor, moved by Councillor Burrell, seconded by Councillor Lackey, that council approve the request from landowners to refund the application fee for 23 to 12 Outlet Road in the amount of $1,250. Any discussion on this motion? This is in regards to the zoning the split zoning that we discussed earlier this evening. Any further discussion on this motion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor, please signify. All those opposed, carried. This is the addition to the agenda this evening, moved by Councillor Maybe, seconded by Councillor Foote, that council endorse the letter received from the United Communities and Families of the Upper St. Lawrence and Lake Ontario region regarding extreme water levels in the Upper St. Lawrence River and Lake Ontario as written / Any discussion on this motion? The letter was distributed to all council members late last week as we received it. I was asked as mayor to endorse the letter. I responded back to Mr. William, letting him know that we would have to bring it to council to receive said endorsement before I could move forward with that. So I'm looking forward to any questions, queries, concerns, so on and so forth. So Deputy Mayor and then Councillor Jameson and Councillor Maybe.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you, I talked to Dan the other day. What after talking to him, what the intention was, he wanted to get that letter fired out that day, of course, which we didn't get our name on, and I said that's fine. That's the way we have to do things. In saying that, neither did Dan, and neither did the other municipalities along the river. Obviously, have to follow the same protocol. So the quicker we get this done, and if Dan Ockley files suit, then what he will do is he will go at them again with the added amendments. So he said, I have no problem with that. It just gives me more face time that they understand it's just growing and growing and growing. So whatever we can do, I think this is the best thing we can do right now.
Further discussion on this motion? Councillor Jameson.
In terms of the letter itself and its principle and its focus, fully supported. I have some procedural concerns which I try to raise, or should raise, to the extent that this is a draft letter, not a finished letter that has been sent. So the concern is endorsing a draft letter, and one never knows if something is going to get changed. That's no reflection on the creators of the letter. That's just caution from my point of view. Second is, it is somewhat prescriptive in that it does suggest to the recipient that they manage themselves in a different way. I think the principle is they need to manage the water differently. how the recipient manages the water differently is not really the weeds we need to get into as a government, because we're a level of government. So endorsing the principle is one thing, but committing ourselves to a draft letter before it's actually clearly a finished letter is one thing. And again, I'm going to repeat myself. Don't question my support of the point of view. I just question this as a tactic from a procedural standpoint, and would prefer to accept the letter as finished and sent, and write a letter in support of it based on our own wordsmithing as soon as we can.
Okay. Further discussion, Councilor Manning?
Thank you, They talked about thousands, isn't millions that are affected by this. Also, that there is no concern or mention that the upper lake levels, which are still continue to be, or said to be high, contribute to this, and that there's no wordage in there that makes them mindful of the upper lake levels and how they do affect us. And I think that will have some repercussions in next year's conditions.
So the motion on the floor is to accept or to endorse a letter as written / amended. So I think that what Councillor Jameson was suggesting is that we would defeat this motion and write a letter in support of, with our own wordsmithing. But it could be, if we accept it as written, as presented, that's what we would support, rather than as amended. It's semantics, I guess, but Deputy Mayor?
So as far as draft versus final, the letter has gone.
It has.
It's
Yeah,
gone.
he already sent it.
It's sent.
It's the same one.
So what I said was, when he says thousands, he's talking about signatures that he has. Yes, there's millions. He doesn't have a million signatures. He has thousands and thousands of signatures and endorsements. And to be honest with you, we should be one of them. Potato. At the end of the day, this is a great group. The TIA is American and Canadian combined. There are island presidents, and I'm going to back them.
Councillor Jameson?
Okay, so what I'm hearing for the first time is the letter is already gone.
Yep.
What we saw was a draft letter. So all
It's
I'm
the
doing,
letter that went.
saying draft. Okay, my point is not to question the efficacy or the veracity of the organization or the principles of the letter. If the letter was sent and this is it, then I certainly would be one to support the letter as sent, because I know what's in the letter exactly. So that's the difference. It's a procedural concern that you just never know what happens, and it's not questioning any of the people involved.
We can get them to send a copy of the business agreement.
Yeah, okay. As sent. So the motion would be changed to say regarding stream water levels as sent versus written or amended. Is that's the motion that we have on the floor. It would just be changing the last as sent instead of yeah, as sent to us. So provided that there's no changes or anything to it, it would be, we would endorse it. Is that amenable? Okay, so. Any further discussion on this motion? So the council endorsed the letter received from the United Counties of Families of the Upper St. Lawrence and Lake Ontario region regarding extreme water levels of the Upper St. Lawrence River and Lake Ontario as sent. Further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor, please signify. All those opposed, carried. Thank you.
basketball. The last 2 minutes stayed with 40 minutes.
Excuse me. Motion on the floor, moved by Councillor Maybe, seconded by Councillor Fody, that council extend regular meeting held on October 15, 2019, beyond 9:15 p.m. but not beyond 9:45. All those in favor, please signify. Thank you. All those opposed, carried. You didn't get a vote. Next motion on the floor, moved by Deputy Mayor Lackey, seconded by Councillor Burrell. Whereas the Committee of the Whole on October 7, 2019 recommend that council refer the matter of membership in St. Lawrence Corridor Economic Development Commission to EDC for their input to council and staff for their recommendation to council. And now therefore be it resolved that council requests the Economic Development Committee to consider the review and input to council on membership in the St. Lawrence Corridor Economic Development Commission, together with a review of the township's other expenditures on economic development, including but not limited to county economic development initiatives, external partnerships, and investments for consideration by council as part of the 2020 budget. So I took some creative liberty with your motion, Councillor Jameson. I know you drafted it, but it's moved by Councillor Lackey and seconded by Councillor Burrell, that we change the word advice to input as per the previous motion, as long as that's a friendly amendment. Deputy Mayor Lackey and Councillor Burrell, you're okay with that? Okay, thank you. Just to stay in the lane of the earlier motion. Any discussion on this motion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor, please signify. All those opposed, carried. Sorry. Mayor's update. I had a lot to add last week. I've had committee of the whole at county and joint services. There's lots going on at county right now. The expansion of Mapleview Lodge and breaking ground there is very exciting because that means a little more long-term care beds for this area, as well as we talked about the Wheels loan program. It's a made in United Counties of Leeds and Grenville, and I'll be quite honest, a number of the mayors were against the program until they heard the statistics that came out of said program. As for a synopsis, it's no or low interest loans for vehicles given to people who are on public or on Ontario Works to alleviate the challenge of getting a job because they don't have the transportation to get there, because they don't have the credit or the ability to borrow because they don't have a job. It's a chicken and egg thing. So the good news is that program is 100% payback. Nobody's defaulted on the loans. And the fact that every single person who's taken on that loan has bettered themselves and got a better job because of their ability to have access to transportation. So this is something that we developed in the United Counties of Leeds and Grenville. And it's been very well received. And I believe the intent is after next year is to take this to the province as one of our shining stars of things that we've done well here in the United Counties of Lees and Runkle. I know that public transportation is on the docket and it will be coming forward for further discussion at council in the next meeting. But public transportation in rural areas is very costly. So having access to a vehicle and transportation is paramount when it comes to getting yourself back and forth to work. As far as the rest of the update, I've been quite ill with pneumonia over the last year, or the last week, I mean, not the last year. But I did power through my meetings and looking forward to tomorrow, which is another full docket. I did want to make a comment in regards to the library hours. I know that social media has had lots to say in regards to the library and the lack of hours or the diminishing capacity in the northern part of the township. I need people to understand that this council has nothing to do with the hours that are set at the municipal libraries. It is set by board of directors, and I would encourage you to engage with your board of directors. Councillor Oakey is part of that board, but we do not have jurisdiction of setting their hours. So we will be going into budgeting talks, and we will be having discussions as per the motion that was passed earlier today in regards to facilities and assets and how they're used. And we really do believe that the library is an integral part of the fabric of this entire township, whether it's the south or the north or what have you. But I know that we're getting calls from concerned citizens not having access to the libraries at certain times of the day, and even going to what Councillor Royal said in regards to young people having access to places to go after school. These are all important things that can be addressed through our local libraries. So I'll ask Councillor Oakey to add his comments to that.
Thank you, Your Worship. And it's sometimes a bit difficult. It's almost like a separation of church and state, because the library is run under the Library Act, and our hands as a council are actually quite tied in terms of dealing with it. There's one crossover issue I noticed, much concern about young people and drugs and places for them to go. And I'm very concerned that the library system seems to be cutting back on its availability. I said before in another remark that the personnel situation of the library seems to be in flux. I have some very grave concerns about the way the place is managed, and if I'm trespassing over a line here, too bad. There's a lot of things that need to be done there. Thank you.
Appreciate your comments, Councillor Oakey. As far as the
The Residents Association is really this year turning over its annual meeting to a business development exercise, and I've given every member of council a flyer on this, trying to encourage particularly as many of our farmers as possible to attend this meeting, because we are discussing the many uses of hemp, and there is an economic opportunity, and there are buyers waiting, and we are working with an agricultural economist, and we are going to turn they are going to turn this meeting over to this specialist. So I would encourage any of you that are available to come to the council. I hope that somebody from the business services side and staff might attend. The details, I know that will be, township will post the details of this meeting in due course, but I would really encourage you to put aside November 6th, 7:30 at Seeley's Bay Community Hall. Let's take a look at a business opportunity. We're always talking about it. And interestingly, this is being taken up by a ratepayers group. So it isn't just about the flowers and the benches. The ratepayers want to generate business in this township too. So I look forward to seeing you all there.
Thank you very much, Councillor Oakey.
Thank you, Your Worship, and if I might, I'd like to, on a more cheerful note, as you know, I was traveling in the UK and Europe last little while, and attending dinner in Coventry. I met the Lord Mayor and the Mayor Consort, a title we don't have, at this dinner, and so I am relaying to the mayor, the deputy mayor, the council, and the citizens of the township of these Thousand Islands, greetings and best wishes on behalf of the city of Coventry from the Lord Mayor and the Mayor Consort.
Nice, thank you. Any further announcements? The only thing that I would add is the mayor's breakfast, which is going to be held at the Lighthouse Resort on November the 14th. So please mark your calendars, and that will begin at 7:30 in the morning. In the morning, Councilor James said you're gonna have to get up early. Anyways, I hope all can attend, and the theme is going to be building communities. So I'm very much looking forward to seeing residences and businesses alike there in attendance. So, any further announcements before we move on, Councilor Burrell?
Just a question, to your worship, are we done with those of motion?
No, we have the.
Are we coming to that? Yeah.
We're coming to the vote.
Thank you.
So the next motion on the floor is moved by Councilor Cody, seconded by Councilor Maybe, that the three readings and final passage be granted to bylaws number 19034 19-040, 19-041, 19-042, 19-043, 19-044, and 19-046, and that three readings and final passage be granted to bylaw number 19047, being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of incorporation of the Township of Leeds and the Thousand Islands at a special meeting held on September 25th, 2019, Committee of the Whole held on October 7th, 2019, and Council meeting held on October 15th, 2019. Any discussion on this motion? Oh, so, Councilor, got it. Okay. Any discussion on this motion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor, please signify. All those opposed, carried.
Excuse me, your worship, I was asking whether we were done with notice of motion and we popped into bylaws.
I was getting
Did we have?
and then the notice.
Oh.
I misunderstood what you meant too. I apologize. I didn't know that the let road went.
Yes, so we're
Doing that right now. And then we'll get into the notice of motion. Apologize. Moved by Councilor Maybe, seconded by Councilor Cody, that three readings and final passage be granted to bylaw number 19-045, being a bylaw to amend the zoning bylaw -07-079 as pertains to 1995 Outlet Road as amended during discussion of resolution number 282-19. Any discussion on this motion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor, please signify. All those opposed, carried. So now we'll do the notice of motion. So Councilor Burrell? The next motion is to
Okay, through you, your worship, yes, a simple notice of motion that staff be instructed to look into an engineering report, I guess, as required, or whatever they require necessary to deal with, is it Lex Road?
Yeah.
With the Lex Road drainage issue for concerning Mr. Peary. Looking for a seconder.
Oh, no, so it's a notice of motion that it gets made at the next meeting. It's just so that it gives us time to formulate it.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Any further notices of motion? Seeing none, I will call the question. All those, moved by Deputy Mayor Lackey, second by Councilor Burrell, that the council meeting adjourn. All those in favor of said motion? All those opposed? Thank you. Have a great evening.